It's how people view these hearings, and it's how people consume this historic moment.
Jake, do you remember Potted Plant?
I do.
All right, that's what I'm talking about, because the three networks mean nothing to me, because 12 million people compared to 330 million people using social media and listening to talk radio means nothing to me. However, the ecosystem of the Beltway tried to protect itself from this last night by discounting and dismissing it. But I know how it works, and I know how a lily pond that reproduces once a day, it takes 29 days to fill half the pond and 1 day to fill it all. And this remark will dominate everything because it so perfectly sum up. It was so authentic. And so, although there are 12 million people watching the evening news, there are 300 million Americans who know Barron. And also the clip of her anger. I mean, she's so angry when she's throwing down and other points. I think it defines, and it will, in fact, impact a great deal of people's reaction to this. And I also think that you'll get a denial of that today all day long from Democrats. They can't control Twitter, Jake. I'm sure you looked last night. It was everywhere.
I did. Yeah. I mean, listen, it definitely got attention. I actually take a different view on this whole thing, which is that people have their minds made up. There's very few people who are persuadable on this issue. People who don't like the president are gonna want him to be impeached and like the impeachment proceedings. People who like the president think it's a sham. Maybe there's 1 or 2% of persuadable people out there. And listen, I mean, I don't know what the difference is in the marginal difference in the substance of these hearings on the American people who are persuadable. So I really don't know what the impact is. And I thought, listen, it's a notable moment. There's no question about that. The president has, using the same guidelines, the president has mocked minor children before as well, or at least in one occasion. I'm not making an excuse. I'm just stating a fact. So, I mean, I understand the president says a lot of things. So everything he says gets fewer eyeballs and less attention. But I think that's what you're going to see a lot of people say today. And I honestly think, yes, for the people who don't like this hearing, for the people who think this process is a sham and like the president, this will be one of the things they remember. There's no question about that.
Now, Jake, what's interesting, you and I are friendly and have been for a long time, so you will appreciate this, I hope. I'm not beating up on Jake here. There's an old saying in the law. It's not my dog. It didn't bite you. Besides, you kicked him first. In the last minute, you said it didn't matter. People have made their minds up. The president has done it before. In other words, do you remember the scene? Are you a Star Wars guy?
Not really, no.
Do you remember the Clone Wars where there's this big arena where all the Jedi are getting massacred by the clones? All right. Yeah. So the Clone Wars, this is a scene from the Clone Wars where all the impeachment defenders, and guess what? Yoda's not coming to help them. They're in a circle and they're being surrounded by the American people.
Because I am not, there's no question that it's bad to rag on the minor son of a president. There's no, forget even rag on, bringing him up. That is something that is bad. To me, so let's leave it right there, and I will say with a lid on that, it is bad. It is not good. It's long been bad. It was bad when people did it to the Obamas. It's bad when people did it to the Bushes, even though I don't think they were ever minors during the Bush presidency, or maybe they were. I can't recall. Moving on from that, I do believe that for a lot of people, it was a minor part of the hearing. For some people,
but I got to say, not just minor. Your colleague Blake, for example, Blake Hausenhell, he's chirping back at me 23 minutes ago, just as the framers argued you can't impeach someone if you're angry about their conduct. That's intended to be snarky and ironic, and Blake often can be snarky and ironic. All it shows me is desperation. The roof fell in, and people are claiming that they like the rain that they're feeling. And it just is one of those moments where, like the Brendan Sullivan moment, I'm not a potted plant. DC is reluctant to let their narrative go. They have a plan. They want to execute it, and it's not working. And Adam Schiff is begging us, and Jerry Nadler is begging us. But play this again. This is the hearing. Cut number 1.
So while the president can name his son Barron, he can't make him a baron.
And it's not because she brings up the president's son and a minor. It's because she's so angry. It just tears the mask off this charade. Last word to you, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can't defend D.C. I can't defend every reporter. I can't my view is that it's not good to bring up a president's minor son, but this is a 5-hour hearing, and yes, it might stick out for some people. This is a long hearing in which a lot of substance was discussed. We haven't even discussed the fact that Nancy Pelosi, in less than 3 hours, is going to give what she has said is an update on the impeachment inquiry. So we're going to know much more about where this is heading and when in the next couple hours.
You know what? It's done. I don't care if she goes on and produces new evidence. It's over after yesterday. And it was over before it got started. But they knew why they didn't want Nadler to touch this. It's because, and their choice of witnesses shows a profound incompetence at the heart. If you want people to believe it's a fair proceeding, you've got to make it a fair proceeding, not a law school faculty meeting. Jake Sherman, Politico Playbook. Go and get it, America. He's here every week. Coming up, your phone calls, 1-800-520-1234. What'd you make of Professor Carlin? Play it again for me, please.
So while the president can name his son Barron, he can't make him a Baron.
1-800-520-1234. What do you think, America? I'm Hugh Hewitt. Good morning.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
The Hugh Hewitt Show. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Hugh Hewitt, good morning to you. Thank you for joining me today on the day after the impeachment proceedings collapsed into the fury of Professor Carlin of Stanford. A moment of clarity, a moment of defining brilliance. Cut number one.
So while the president can name his son Barron, he can't make him a baron.
I know it's not what she said, it's how she said it. I know it's the mask that dropped, but you're not an angry bunch. In fact, you're a giving bunch. We are $24 shy of $120,000 donated to the Salvation Army over at hughhewitt.com in 10 days, and I appreciate that and would love, thank you for the $5 donated anonymously 7 minutes ago. Thank you for the $1,040 donated 2 hours ago anonymously. Both of those donors, God bless you. And everyone out there who realizes the Salvation Army does the most for the lost and the least, especially the addicted. John and Virginia Schroeder, $1,500. And then Joel Huber, $208. Timothy Oswald, $200. Randy Olson, $52. Thank you all. God bless you. Please, if you're moved, don't let the politics or the hatred of D.C. stop you from taking care of the people who don't even know there are politics and hatred in D.C. because they're addicted and homeless. Go to Salvation Army Red Kettle at Hugh Hewitt and dig deep. I want to do a power round here. Reactions to Professor Carlin. John in Powell, Michigan. Good morning, John. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hi, Hugh. Merry Christmas to you, brother.
Thank you, and to you.
I guess specifically to what she said yesterday, it really, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It showed, without a doubt, the hatred that these people have for President Trump. But more importantly to me is, as long as this has been going on, and it has been failure after failure after failure for the Democrats to present a case of impeachment, and yet they keep rolling along with it. And I just wonder, when is this house of cards going to crumble on them?
Watch that space. I think it shattered yesterday, but we will see. Stephen, Cherry Hills, New York, New Jersey. 30 seconds, Stephen. Go ahead.
Hey, Hugh. Yeah, the funny thing is people don't know. You read the highlights on the emails from the Globe and the New York Times this morning, the Boston Globe. There's no mention that these professors had any association with the Biden administration, were donors. So, there's still this perpetuation of hiding news to people who, a huge number of the people who are against Trump and feel that he's totally guilty because their news is so slanted that way. And that's part of the problem is you have this cleavage in the country because people don't realize they still think the dossier is real and valid.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because the little echo chamber of the Manhattan Beltway media elite doesn't matter. Does not matter. Cheryl in Illinois. Hello, Cheryl.
Good morning, Hugh. They're desperate. They have nothing else. Something is terribly wrong, gone wrong with us as a country that we've allowed something to get to this point. They dig a hole to trap others, but they're going to fall into this themselves.
There's something desperately wrong about this. Cut number one, please.
So while the president can name his son Barron, he can't make him a baron.
You see, I have been in hundreds of faculty meetings, and this is a skill set. Righteous indignation over small matters that you think are significant. It's a fury that is infused by tenure, and it drives the resistance, and it was on full display yesterday, and ordinary people said, whoa, what? Fred, Chicago, Illinois. Hi, Fred.
Hey, good morning, Hugh. What it reminded me of the basket of deplorables comment, and what I mean by that is, number one, it sounded rehearsed. The way she said it just it came off like she had said it before, kind of like how we learned that Hillary Clinton had said that before, the basket of deplorables in the Hamptons, etc. And number two, what struck me is the laughter from a lot of the audience, who were, of course, Democrats.
Can I comment on this,
similar-
Fred, for a second? It's not just they were Democrats. It's that they are elitists. This is a law school classroom delivered line. I've been teaching law school con law for 25 years. I know which lines in my notes get laughs. She's used this line before. She has never used it in a situation where anyone would hear it and push back. The students in her room who thought, that's lame, that's old, that's prejudiced, that's just stupid, would never dare have said that. And adoring crowds would have clapped. It's why the bubble exists. It's why it trapped people. Professor Carlin is trapped in the bubble, but the bubble came up to the surface yesterday, and a lot of people were disgusted. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
returns from break in 5 seconds.
There is a book that is ranked number 1 in the category General History of Religion, number 1 in the category History of Religions, and number 1 in the category History of Christianity. That book is titled provocatively God's Hand on America, Divine Providence in the Modern Era. Now, who would write God's Hand on America, Divine Providence in the Modern Era, and be number 1 in Christian history? Well, none other than, of course, Michael Medved, who is, of course, my longtime friend. I've been talking to Michael literally on the air for 30 years. The most prolific talk show host I know when it comes to writing books that must be read and books generally. Michael, good morning to you. A great season of good cheer, I hope, as well.
Thank you, and to you, too. And I'm permitted to say Merry Christmas to the entire Hewitt family.
No, thank you, and Happy Hanukkah to the Medved family. Michael, I am so pleased that someone was bold enough to write God's Hand on America, Divine Providence in the Modern Era. I blurbed it saying to people, when you read this, you're going to have to pause and consider the argument that Michael is right. Are you hearing that?
Yes, and what's really been very gratifying is a lot of people have suggested that the main themes of the book have actually persuaded them. And this goes way back in American history, is we did have founding fathers who were religiously unconventional, who didn't hold to conventional Christian religion, people like Jefferson and Franklin. But they had no doubt at all about the involvement of a supreme being, of what Washington called an invisible hand, guiding our republic and involving God's influence on our development and protection and sustenance. And what's fascinating to me is that this idea hasn't died. I write in the book about John Updike in 1968, right after Robert Kennedy was killed, said God has now withdrawn his special blessing from America. But if you look at what's happened to America since 68, we have won the Cold War. We have saved hundreds of millions of people from AIDS and from starvation. Capitalism has become really the model for the whole world, not socialism. Our special blessing is not withdrawn. America's dominance is more important and more real than ever before.
Now, the greatest speech in American history is not, to the dismay of some, the Gettysburg Address, but President Lincoln's second inaugural, in which he includes this line, "Yet, if God wills that it continue," meaning the Civil War, "until all the wealth piled up by the bondsmen 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether." This is as complete a reliance on divine intervention as one will find in American history, but today people avert their eyes.
They do, and they avert their eyes not only from Lincoln, but two of the chapters in the new book are about Franklin Roosevelt, who, honestly, until I began researching this, they have, in a sense, erased this guy's Christian commitment. In his D-Day prayer, he says that our troops are fighting for Christian civilization. And Roosevelt, in the last inaugural that he gave, the fourth inaugural address, talks very much in the same terms that Martin Luther King did, who I also write about in the book, that there is King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And Roosevelt, in his final inaugural address, talked about divine providence protecting America, giving us stout hearts and strong arms, and allowing us to move forever upward. And that's the kind of confidence that Americans need to regain now.
Now, Michael Medved, in God's Hand Upon America, your brand new book, are you an optimist that I don't think there's a war on religion? I just think there's a gradual diminishment of attachment to it, one that is abetted by secular hostility to expressions of faith, or at least suspicion. Do you think God's Hand Upon America in the Modern Era is something that simply isn't fit for, public consumption because people roll their eyes?
No. Look, first of all, I think that many people, and it's fascinating to me, I've heard from a lot of people who are secularists, who are not churchgoers, who are not synagogue goers, who say, well, wait a minute, this is a real thing. And again, I think of my own father, because my dad became religious later in life. But even when we were growing up, he always had this sense that there was something fateful, godlike, divine about America. And it's because of the history of our family. I mean, all four of my grandparents are immigrants. My mother was born in Germany and was able to get out. And when you look at what America has meant to each of our families, then it should persuade people that there is something spectral, unusual, dramatic about this. One of the things that is fascinating to me is right now there's this movie which is pretty good. I bet you've seen it. You've seen Midway, haven't you?
Oh, yes, I did.
And you liked it, I assume.
I loved it.
Yeah, me too. And the only thing I would say about that movie is, I have a whole chapter about the Battle of Midway, is that all of the participants, including the Japanese, saw the hand of God in that battle. There was a great book, which is now out of print, unfortunately, called God Was at Midway, and then another one called Miracle at Midway. And it was 5 minutes changed the course of history. What's amazing to me is the subsidiary story of this Japanese captain, the most decorated flyer in the history of the Japanese Navy, who led the attack on Pearl Harbor. His name was Matsuo Fushida. He was at Midway. He saw God's hand. And after the war, he became a Christian and an American and an evangelist and appeared 9 times with Billy Graham. He was known as God's Samurai.
Now, that's interesting. Midway is a mixed word in our family because my wife's mom's first husband, who died in the war, was the brother of John Waldron. The cousin of John Waldron. So Waldron's lost squadron at Midway. There's a disaster in the triumph, right? There's suffering in the joy. There's always loss along with abundance. I don't think you shy away from that at all in God's hand in America.
No, of course, because the idea that God sustains and protects the United States doesn't mean we have only winning encounters. It doesn't mean that terrible things don't happen. It doesn't mean that Americans don't make mistakes. What it means is, you were talking about Lincoln before, Hugh, and Lincoln frequently referred to himself as an instrument. And that's what America is. It's not that America is better than other nations. It's just that we have been very clearly chosen to execute the divine will, and that makes every sense of the world. What other nation is God going to choose? Belgium? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with Belgium, but obviously, if you're going to change the whole world, as Walter McDougall, who's a professor at Penn, says, that without any contest at all, the rise and development of the United States is the greatest historical event of the last 500 years.
I completely agree with that. Now, Michael, can you lose God's favor? Because it's interesting. I am currently in a scripture class taught by a brilliant pastor, attended, by the way, by people of both faiths, both Jewish and Christian faith, where he's going through what we call the Old Testament, you call the Torah and the Talmud, and bringing to our attention this biblical narrative, which is ancient and unfolding. You can lose favor in the Old Testament, right? You're not Hezekiah. You're one of the kings that doesn't do so well. What about America?
Well, you don't lose the covenant. You lose favor, and you get chastisement. And by the way, the idea of being used as a special instrument of God means that sometimes God has to smack you down and put you in the right direction. And it's interesting that you say both Christian and Jewish, because one of the things that has gotten a lot of attention in this book is the idea. I have a chapter called The Abrahamic Advantage, which is about the fact that long before there were any Jews at all who actually lived in the United States, our very early founders, back to Puritan days, were Zionists. They were people who believed that the United States was rising and was gaining power for the purpose of helping return and restore the Jewish people to their land. John Adams was a Zionist literally 100 years before Theodore Herzl.
Wow.
Which is kind of an amazing thing, and wrote about it and wrote about it, America's mission being to lead the Jewish people back in triumph to Judea, and he referred to it as Judea, not Palestine, and to rebuild the temple.
What?
Yes.
Rebuild the temple?
Yeah. And the first consul general.
I'm not. By the way, we're not endorsing that. I'm just being shocked at something I didn't know.
Neither am I, because in Jewish terms, and I think in Christian terms too, that's an end of days thing. That's a Messiah thing, or a Messiah's return thing. But again, I don't know of any sane political leaders in Israel who actually want to rebuild the temple now. But the vision of a rebuilt Jerusalem, of a return to Zion, was something that was embraced by our founders. Emma Lazarus, who wrote those indelible words on the base of the Statue of Liberty, "Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free," was a Zionist before Herzl, and wrote about America being used as a vehicle to help restore the Jewish people to their ancient home. And Harry Truman embraced that. Harry Truman, who recognized the independence of Israel 12 minutes after it was announced in Jerusalem, he was being introduced in 1951 and by his old friend Eddie Jacobson at a Jewish fundraising event. And he said, "Here's my old friend President Truman, who's one of the people who helped to restore ancient Israel." And Truman got up. He said, "Eddie, you said one of the people? I am Cyrus. Cyrus."
I didn't know that. That is terrific.
There's tons of stuff here that has been, I think, covered up in history books. Just how Christian, deeply Christian, Martin Luther King actually had what was called a kitchen conversion, where God spoke to him during the Montgomery bus boycott. And basically throughout his life was prophetic, and his life was spared again and again and again. There was a very serious murder attempt against King where he got a knife in his heart. This is 10 years before he actually died. And he believed and understood that he was being sustained for a purpose, and the purpose was preserving, protecting, growing, developing America.
And that is the story of America, God's Hand on America. That is the title of Michael Medved's new book, God's Hand on America. I've just tweeted out the link. Go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your bookstore. It is the perfect Christmas present. God's Hand on America. Michael, always good to talk to you. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, thank you. And if I can, I'm going to be in Atlanta on Sunday speaking for the Republican Jewish Coalition. And I hope any folks who are listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show, who are interested in joining us, Jewish, Christian, whatever, join us in Atlanta.
And if you're listening on 920, how do they find that, Michael?
MichaelMedved.com. We have
of course.
Information up there.
MichaelMedved.com. Thank you, Michael. The book, God's Hand on America. Now, time for me to tell you, ReliefFactor.com. Don't leave home without it. You're about to go out the door in Atlanta or Seattle. You're about to leave in New York City. You're going out the door in San Diego. Doesn't matter where you are. If you're one of God's chosen people, you're in Ohio and you're leaving the door and you've got ReliefFactor.com. You've already taken it. But if you forgot, turn around, go back and get it. Turn around, go back and get the Icarian Curcumin Resveratrol Omega that will make your day a little bit easier because you've got the right levels of these natural supplements that work in concert with your body to support the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that plague you every single day. So please, please, please go and get it. Take it. The starter pack is $19.95 and get with the program. I'll be back for the final segment of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay by.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Salvation Army.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Thank you so much for joining us today. What a great show. It's been our interview with Jake Sherman, posted over at HughHewitt.com, wherein I explain with Jake why cut number one matters so much. Cut number one.
So while the president can name his son Baron, he can't make him a baron.
So many universes contained in that comment. We've explored it thoroughly today. I want to close, though, by saying thank you to a bunch of people. $520 was donated to the online Red Kettle 3 minutes ago. Susan Brown donated $2,500 7 minutes ago. Thank you, Susan. I know that is a big number, and I appreciate it. Deborah and Dennis Resinger donated $208. Beth Hilt, $52. Richard and Janet Lanier, $520. Donald Peterson, $500. Arthur Bear, $10.40. Thank you all. From $10 to $2,500, every donation represents exactly what I love about this audience and why it is so special. And we make sure it stays in your community and you can trust the Red Kettle. You cannot always trust fundraising at Christmas time. In fact, Major Jim Ricard of the Salvation Army explains that.
I'm just kind of curious who would do something like that, because number one, it's like the kettles were empty. There's nothing in them. If you see some guy standing at the exit ramp on the highway holding our bucket, that's not us. Our kettles will have the little Salvation Army sticker on the kettle now itself. We've started putting those on there now so that after this, so that people will see that that's a bona fide ringer.
There is a lot of fraud. You do not have to worry about that if you go to HughHewitt.com. And a bell ringer with the Salvation Army Red Kettle you can trust as well. Trust your heart. If you're being moved to give. I got to close with a very funny, very revelatory comment over at Twitter. One of the angry people, Trump hating, Hugh Hewitt hating people, are out there saying people shouldn't appear on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Jason Zangurli, 13 minutes ago. I understand why Hewitt has good objective reporters on his show, because they serve as cover for his epic bad faith. I do not understand why good objective reporters agree to go on his show and give it to him. That's a New York Times writer. And I'm going to retweet it and comment. He's with the New York Times Magazine, and his bio says friendship, character, ethics. New York Times Magazine writer at large. Now, he can start with Michael Shear of the New York Times. By the way, don't go on Twitter and abuse the guy. I mean, he's just wrong. He may not be rotten. He may not be Bill Maher. Bill Maher is both rotten and wrong. Most people are just wrong. I don't know him. I know that he is against fair and open conversation. He doesn't want to debate. He doesn't want to deal with the problems of his side. I know that he's so deeply sheep-dipped in Trump derangement syndrome that he can't see why it is good for the country to have a show like this that breaks the news and analyzes it, that focuses on what everyone is talking about. There are in this country a half dozen people with audiences this large every morning with three or every day. There's me, there's Mike Gallagher, there's Dennis Prager, there's Seb Gorka. I mean, there's the Bigfoot, Rush, got 20 million people. You got Sean, you got Larry Elder, Mark Levin. What is that, 7 people? That's about it. There are about 7 people with audiences this size on the radio drive, and I'm the only one driving you to work. And so Jason doesn't want anyone who doesn't toe the line. He wants all people who toe the line to avoid the show, because that gives credibility to me. Honestly, after 30 years, I don't need anyone's credibility. My audience doesn't change. The people who come here because they care about issues, and it's their job. It's their profession. They love to talk about it. It's why Hillary Clinton's been here and John Kerry. It's why Ruth Marcus was on this morning. It's why people get a fair shake. They get courtesy, gratitude, respect, appreciation. It's what drives the show. I just don't know what's happened to the left wing in this country. It's gone from being liberal, one of the favorite themes of the Cheeto-addicted, skateboarding, hula hoop, counting to 10 in Russian, Dennis Prager's remarks, which is the liberals have fled the Democratic Party, has been overcome by leftists. And leftists are not liberal. Leftists are anti-liberal. Leftists are absolutely heading down the totalitarian path. They're not far down, but they've got to turn back. They've actually got to come back and realize good people of good faith can disagree on stuff and not scream and demand that the other side be jailed, shut down, exiled. The projection that I see on the left on Twitter, it's just ill. It's an illness. And Jason just gave voice to it. Stephen in Florida, very quick exit comment. Stephen, what do you say? 30 seconds.